everyone, it's Alex, and today I'm here to talk about Allie Smith, and more specifically, her seasonal quartet. Before even talking about the quartet itself, I feel like a part of it being so rewarding is being able to feel like I kind of have a grasp on the characteristics of Smith's writing. I've read 3 of Smith's novels before I read the quartet, and I feel like they each have their own sort of bubbling of qualities that sort of affirmed for me that not only is this quartet a great series, but I could definitely see them being really great standalones. And Smith is a really hard writer to describe in the first place, with her stream of consciousness prose in particular. I feel like I've gathered kind of 3 distinct qualities of how I would describe Smith and how I would probably talk about her to people considering reading her. And I have those 3 qualities jotted down here, and with the first one I would say it being her focused on the referential, establishing a sense of reconnection, and also having this surprising absence of character. And if there's at least one thing I feel like people have heard about the quartet is that it does have nods to real-world events. And the quartet spans from 2016 to 2020, so unbeknownst to Smith, she had a lot to work with, but autumn talks about Brexit, winter talks about protest, spring talks about immigration, and summer actually does talk about the coronavirus. While these are just encompassing examples, I think what really does the job for me is how effective Smith is at characterizing a character's personal struggle in a fictitious space, especially in high contrast to these real-world events. Like when reading Winter and there's a part about Trump's speech to the Boy Scouts at the West Virginia Jamboree. To me, Winter feels like a rom-com in general, like the tone of it, sort of relying on those encompassing narratives of when you think of winter, you might immediately think of Christmas. So juxtaposed with all of that good feeling Christmas kitschiness, it really feels like this weird juxtaposition of heightening the unbelievability of Trump's speech. And to me, with this example, I think would be a perfect sort of first step in realizing that the magic of Smith with this quartet in particular is how effortlessly she blends satire and sincerity. Because overall, I would say that the quartet, first and foremost, does prioritize this sense of urgency about the world. Even if I think personally that sometimes Smith shows her age by commenting about the technology of the world, but it's with these rants like about technology that become so well absorbed and adapted and molded by these very much younger characters that Smith loves to put in her stories. And with these child characters so frequent in Smith's stories, it almost feels like they serve as a way to shepherd me along this story. Nearly taking on this sort of mythological quality, it's like they serve as a placeholder of this unnamed future that is both uncertain but also strangely optimistic. For example, there's Florence in the book Spring that helps out a character named Brittany feel more enlightened about her position working at an immigration detention center. And in Summer, there's Sacha and Robert, who are 2 younger characters that sort of help revolve around this inciting incident to bring back familiar faces from autumn, winter, and spring. So earlier when I mentioned Smith's work having this sense of reconnection as a quality to her writing in general, I think it's because with her portfolio of books that it never quite feels like her ideas are manifested or contained within one space. Which is why as I've continued reading more of her work, it kind of feels great because I think she's someone that details an homage to storytelling versus being concerned with telling a story from her own perspective. For example, in Autumn, we get a direct reference to Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, and Winter makes reference to Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So really, it feels like her stories are just portals to other stories, especially with this quartet. Namely, in the introductions of the books, there are these brief quotes from other books or other writers that kind of serve as ingredients for whatever tone that's being established for whatever season that you're reading. So I think that Smith finally achieves this sense of unity within the quartet that she was trying to achieve with her past work, where I would say she would try to achieve unity quite literally. In Hotel World, it's a story about a girl named Sarah that dies and tries to communicate with her physical body whenever she becomes a ghost, and how to be both a deceased artist can see a disembodied portrait of himself. And in Winter, it's nice that it becomes full circle as Smith references a disembodied head, kind of again reinforcing this literal reconnection as a trademark of her work. But it's that kind of playfulness that I think Smith isn't shy from straying from, that I think is so consistent in her work, that also proves she's not afraid to tackle thematic gestures. With that consistency this time, taking on a 4-year project to talk about real-world events. Because I think what she ends up doing is asking readers to be conscious of the difference between reading fiction and treading on your life ending up feeling like fiction, unifying the capable results of what it means to read it all, depending on your susceptibility to being indulged with stories in the first place. I feel like at this point, it's still me trying to establish a common thread with Smith's work and making her sound compelling instead of confusing. So with Smith, I would definitely say there's no sense of control that you feel as a reader, which I think is somehow incredibly advantageous. I mentioned earlier stream of consciousness, but I would also really just summarize it by saying that her writing feels sharp and quippy and sometimes feels like I'm reading prose poetry. But it's with this final characteristic of her work being that it feels like there's this absence of character that's probably my favorite. With every work I've read by Smith so far, I can truly say it feels like I've never read about one singular character. Most of the time in her books, I feel like characters share some respite with engaging in banter with each other, often trying to outsmart each other, but in its own way deflecting their ideas, which is kind of the whole point. Emphasizing that playfulness and cleverness and sense of mischief that often plagues Smith's work in the best way, which kind of emphasizes this self-righteous cadence to Smith's characters, initially maybe thinking about how their lives matter more than others. But the pattern usually ends up being that Smith's characters realize that the world is so much larger than themselves. In There Before That, it's about a character named Miles that locks himself in a room during a dinner party. In Hotel World, it's the reader accruing more knowledge to the exposure of characters that are meant to personify the stages of grief. And in How to Be Both, it's about how two characters can transcend time and even gender. It's kind of funny to me how I feel like it's easy in this context to summarize Smith's books this way with these really brief descriptions, when really that could be farther from the truth because there's so much to discover inside with how Smith takes the leap with stories. And with the seasonal quartet in general, I would say, sure, that these are meditations on the seasons. But what really convinced me that this is actually a series that I love is because whenever I finished it with Summer, which is my favorite of the 4, there's a feature to Smith's writing that I didn't think she was really ever something I would characterize her as, but there is this overwhelming sort of compassion and gratitude to a person's resilience. And collectively, how it feels like she embodies these characters to just say that it's okay to trying, as cheesy as that sounds. I don't think I can really judge on the effectiveness of this now being a completed quartet based on what I think will lure a lot of readers in, being about these political and societal Easter eggs. With Summer itself, out of the 4 especially, feeling like a big part of its intention is to tidy up the storylines from autumn, winter, and spring. But what Smith taps into with Summer is this nostalgia for life that doesn't really feel like it's happened yet, being sort of this post-coronavirus era, kind of manifesting how someone is able to try to think of even memorializing an experience that will eventually become a memory, even if it's still ongoing in real time. Kind of in the similar vein of how we already consider how we might memorialize the subject matter in the previous installments of the quartet that now kind of feel like so long ago. But what really did it for me is how Smith describes this pitch-perfect sense of sentimentality with this yearnfulness for hope, but also like something it feels like you're leaving behind. And I think Smith describes it best whenever she says, "But that's summer for you. Summer's like walking down a road just like this one, heading towards both light and dark, because summer isn't just a merry tale, because there's no merry tale without the darkness. And summer's really surely all about an imagined end. We head for it instinctually like it must mean something. We're always looking for it, looking to it, heading towards it all year, the way a horizon holds the promise of a sunset. We're always looking for the full open leaf, the open warmth, the promise that we'll one day soon surely be able to lie back and have summer done to us. One day soon we'll be treated well by the world, like there really is a kinder finale, and it's not just possible but assured. There's a natural harmony that'll be spread at your feet, unrolled like a sunlit landscape just for you, as if what it was always all about, your time on earth, was the full happy stretch of all the muscles of the body on a warmed patch of grass, one long sweet stem of that grass in the mouth, carefree. What a thought. Summer.